everyone, and thank you so much for joining us here today. My name is Liz Harvey Roberts. I am the Chief Development Officer for the Nature Conservancy here in California, and I've been with the organization 10 years. Why did I come here? Because I love the mission of the organization and I love the outdoors. I grew up backpacking and running and biking, so I really appreciate that I have that familiarity with our California state parks as well as our national parks. And at this point, I would love to introduce you to Alexis Jackson, who is the Fisheries Project Director for the California chapter, and Tom Dempsey, who is California Oceans Program Director for our California chapter. And I'd like to now turn it over to Alexis. So Alexis, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do at the Nature Conservancy, and then and lead us into the presentation.
Yeah, thanks, Liz, and morning, everyone. Again, my name is Alexis Jackson. I'm a Fisheries Project Director with the Oceans team, and I also serve as our Plastics Policy Lead for the Oceans Program. I've been with TNC for about 3 years now, and I'm broadcasting from my home in Oakland, California. I'm an Oakland native, so it's nice to be back home. My background is actually in conservation genetics. I made a shift when I finished my PhD and started engaging in policy work. So my focus since then has been on domestic and international fisheries policy, and have largely focused on tuna, swordfish, and sharks. And so I'm excited to be here and to talk to you guys today, finding ways to stay busy during shelter in place, things like racing back and forth to the fridge, Netflix, crochet, and gardening. So with that, I'll pass it over to Tom to introduce himself.
Great, thanks so much, Alexis, and good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Tom Dempsey. I am the Director of the Oceans Program for the Nature Conservancy here in California. I've been with TNC for about 5 years now, and I joined as I moved my family from the Northeast. I was working out on Cape Cod with a group of really conservation-focused commercial fishermen, folks that were working really hard to end overfishing there and recover ocean health to support their livelihoods and their communities. Today, I'm coming at you hunkered down from Pacific Grove, California. It's right next to Monterey. I live here with my incredible wife and our 3 young kids, and I've kicked all of them out so we can have a quiet conversation today, or a quieter conversation than we'd have if my young kids were in the room. They're safe, they got their masks on, they're keeping their distance, but hopefully they'll be out there and having fun while we get a chance to connect. Let's get started. I wanted to, before we dive into oceans work, and specifically ocean plastic pollution, I just wanted to take a minute to introduce the Nature Conservancy. I know some of you know us really well, and others probably not as well. The Nature Conservancy was founded in 1951, and today it's the largest conservation organization in the world. So we have chapters in all 50 states. We have projects in 79 countries around the world, all looking to protect nature and the many benefits that thriving natural systems provide for people. Over all the years and around the world, we've been able to protect 120 million acres of land. That's an area that's roughly 20% larger than the entire state of California. And again, over the organization's history, we've been able to protect 173 million acres of ocean habitat. And that's an area larger than the state of Texas. And so you may or may not be familiar with our name, but you've probably seen some of our work here in California, like the network of 124 marine protected areas we helped establish across the state, or our work protecting some of California's most incredible spots, from Independence Lake in the Sierras to the new Dangerman Preserve, 25,000 acres at Point Conception, or the Marin Headlands. And of course, this is not a time to rest on our accomplishments or rest on our laurels, and we don't intend to. We are living at a critical moment for conservation. We have a number of really important threats to nature, from ever more severe and frequent wildfires, to catastrophic bleaching events in our coral reefs, to increases in emissions and pollution, and the list just goes on and on. And when I think about what allows the Conservancy to advance our conservation work in a changed and changing world, I always come back to our core strength as an organization. And it's actually why I personally work at TNC. And that is that despite all these daunting challenges, we just fundamentally reject hopelessness. We are convinced that we can build solutions that protect nature and work for people. And I think that's as important, maybe more important now than it ever has been. And throughout our experience all around the world, we've observed a lot of things and we've learned a lot of things. And one of the things I think we've really learned is that oftentimes the people best positioned to solve really big problems are the people that live with those problems every single day. And these are farmers and ranchers, fishermen, landowners, resource users, and resource managers. And we work closely with all those groups and many others. And we bring cutting edge science and technology to try to build win-win solutions for nature. We demonstrate the benefits of those solutions in a particular place, and then we try to scale those up through market and policy work. So that's who we are, and that's our model for how we make change in the world. Now let's talk about how that touches down for oceans. As you all know, oceans are critical for all life on Earth. They cover about 70% of the Earth's surface. They're home to over 1 million species and support some of the most diverse and productive ecosystems on the planet. And they're so vast that for a long time, they were widely thought to be basically infinite, almost limitless in their ability to provide for us. For centuries, people thought that humans could just never cause a decline in a fish population or drive an ocean species extinct. And frankly, we just underestimated ourselves. We have done those things time and time again. And now, especially as we confront a climate crisis, we need bold action to protect and restore our oceans. And the world needs California to lead in driving this change. So here at TNC, our vision is that the diversity and benefits of ocean ecosystems are restored and protected, and that the conservation solutions we develop here can scale to have a global impact. And a big part of achieving this ambitious vision to restore healthy and thriving oceans means addressing the growing threat of plastic pollution. And so as we start talking about plastics, I just wanted to stop and get something off my chest, sort of a confession, and that is that I am absolutely addicted to plastic. We all are. Most of us can't go through an hour, much less a day, without using it in some form. And it's actually so ubiquitous and we use it so much we don't even notice it. It's just woven into almost every aspect of our modern lives. And it's really difficult to even imagine a time when we didn't use plastic. But it wasn't actually always like this, and Liz got to this a little bit in the introduction. Not that long ago, people didn't use very much plastic at all. In the 1950s and 60s, plastic use was still relatively low. But today, not only do we use much, much more plastic, but all too often, that plastic waste is ending up in our oceans. Every 8 minutes, we dump the equivalent of 1 blue whale worth of plastic waste into our ocean. And now I want you to think about 2 things as you think about that. The first is blue whales weigh about 300,000 pounds. They're the biggest creature to ever walk, swim, or crawl on the planet, bigger than any of the dinosaurs. And 2, 8 minutes is about as long as it takes to make a sandwich. That is a staggering amount of plastic waste that's going into our oceans. And now think about what these numbers are going to look like as plastic use continues to increase over time. And we're on track to quadruple our current use by 2050. It's just overwhelming. And tragically, already today, plastic pollution is everywhere we look. From the highest mountain ranges to the deepest ocean trenches, plastic is from the North Pole to the South Pole. It's in the air that we breathe. It's in the water we drink. It's even in the food that we feed our families. And that's the same situation confronting a whole bunch of animals that live in the ocean. Plastic's in the water they live in and the food they eat too. And we already know that plastic waste is having a really significant impact on a whole range of these species. It's entangling seabirds and turtles and whales. It's impacting key habitats like coral reefs, and it's being ingested by nearly every creature in the sea. And all that ingested plastic is accumulating up and up and up through the food chain until it lands on our dinner plates. And while we're still learning every day more and more about the specific health impacts to humans for ingesting that plastic, I can pretty much guarantee that everyone on this webinar would prefer to have their entree without a side of plastic. I know I would. So the good news, if there is any, the good news is that plastic pollution is increasingly in the news. We are waking up to this issue together. Almost every day, we're seeing new research and new reporting on this problem. We're waking up to just how much plastic we're using individually and all together. We're waking up to what that means for nature and for all of us. So let's talk about solutions here. About a year ago, my team and I started to look for ways that we could make a big difference in reducing plastic waste. And we started by understanding or trying to understand everything we could about how plastic moves through our economy, how it moves through our lives. And the more we learned, we started to hone in on what we call the life cycle of plastics. And so one of the difficult parts of working on plastics as a conservation issue is it is so complex. And I'm sure many of you, as you have started to wrap your arms around this, the complexity is overwhelming. There's so many different types of plastic and ways it's used and potential solutions. But despite all this complexity, if you boil it all down, fundamentally all plastic is created, it's consumed in some way, it's disposed of, either properly or not, and then some small fraction of the plastic that leaks out into our natural systems is recovered. And that could be someone picking up litter on the street or at the beach, or the ambitious efforts to recover the vast amounts of plastic that are floating right now in our ocean gyres around the world. So understanding this framework and this life cycle helps us understand and identify where there could be levers for change, where we can build solutions. So after our team reviewed all the science and created this framework, we started to really think deeply about what needed to be done. And we came to the conclusion that just like in so many other really important conservation challenges, there just isn't a simple fix. There's no silver bullet. We need urgent thinking and creative thinking and action in absolutely every step of this life cycle. And as we thought about the right role and priorities for the Conservancy as we engage in this issue, we looked out at all the great work that other groups are doing. And there's some great things going on that are really exciting. And then we took a look at what our core competencies are, what we do best as an organization, and how we could add the most value on this issue. So with all this in mind, we built a strategy with 3 primary components. First, leading with science. This is just in our DNA as an organization. We cannot solve problems that we don't understand. And all of us together are in the very early days of understanding the dynamics and drivers and impacts of plastic pollution. So our team is working with leading scientists to go deeper in understanding the footprint of major plastic using industries, including textiles and agriculture and fisheries, all with a focus of gathering information that we can use to intervene, to act. Second, we're engaging California's innovation and technology sector, trying to build solutions. We recently launched a partnership with IDEO, a leading Silicon Valley design firm, to explore opportunities where innovation and design thinking could unlock new ways to monitor plastic flows and reduce plastic pollution. And third, we're driving change through policy, working with a broad range of partners to shape new policies here in California to tackle this issue head on. And it's this third arm, this policy piece, that we're going to focus on for the rest of our time together today. And I'm going to hand it over to Alexis, who leads this element of our strategy, to tell you more about it. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Tom. Just really wanted to start off by answering the question, why policy work? And I think through policy work, things like advancing state legislation, things like signing on to ballots and petitions, it's possible to do 2 things. You can more effectively coordinate supporters, and you can bring innovative solutions more quickly to scale. So what that means on the plastics issue is that we can potentially have a bigger impact in a shorter period of time. And so we're doing this work in California because California continues to be a leader in the environmental movement. And we've seen that time and time again, they're creating and demonstrating these innovative solutions that scale not only to other states, but to countries around the world. And so it should be no surprise that California is also a leader on plastics. In 2014, we saw California as the first state to introduce a plastic bag ban. And subsequently, we saw 5 other states follow. In 2018, we saw California as the first state to pass straw upon request legislation. And the following year, we saw more than 20 states introduce plastic straw legislation. We absolutely need to celebrate these wins, and we can't run over the progress that we've made, but we also need to acknowledge the fact that there's more work to be done. As Californians, we recognize that our coasts are extremely valuable and unique ecosystems. And in a state that has more than 1,100 miles of coastline, where the threats of plastics to our ocean are real, it's my job to make sure that we're protecting these important habitats. So why do we think we can do this here in California? It's because data tells us that there's a growing appetite for plastics policy work here in California. Over the past 6 years, we've seen an increase not only in the number of bills introduced, but also in the number of members who are engaging on this topic from across the state. And this is exciting. TNC wants to keep the energy and momentum around this issue as we move forward. Now, that's not to say that the road will be easy. There's certainly opposition. Plastics touches down in almost every industry, from food and beverage to beauty and pharmaceutical. And it also provides a very cost-effective manufacturing solution. And because of that, the plastics lobbying industry is well-funded, motivated, and extremely powerful. They've become very effective at presenting misinformation, especially on complex issues. And also they've gotten very good at putting accountability on you, the individual. And while we know that individuals can create a lot of great change, we need more than that. We need the producers and manufacturers to take accountability for the role that they're playing in the plastics pollution problem. And so taking all of that into consideration, we need to be coming up with policy solutions that are simple and clear and outline the impacts. And through that, we can bring it into an approach and think about how do we move forward on this issue. And so for the rest of the talk, we're really going to be talking about the how, the when, and the why of when we engage in policy. So let's start by talking about the fastest growing sector in plastics that serves the least essential function. And by these, we mean the single-use plastics. So about 300 million tons of plastic are produced each year. That's the equivalent of about 1,000 blue whales. 1,000, that's a large number. About 50% of this, though, is single-use. We're really only using it once. And so these plastics that are in your hand for seconds, maybe minutes, when they enter the marine environment, may last for upwards of decades or even centuries. And so for that reason, we're really thinking about how can we work to reduce production of these single-use plastics? And that gets to what we refer to as source reduction. So that's really engaging at that first step in the plastics life cycle, how we're reducing that production and then thinking about what are the right incentives? How do we move from these products to those that we can reuse and refill time and time again? And so when we think about what are the critical components that we'd like to see in plastics policy, we think about 4 things. We think about eliminating, innovating, recirculating, and improving. Eliminating. We need to eliminate unnecessary plastic. That means that we're trying to reduce production and again, incentivize those necessary transitions to things that we can reuse and refill. Innovate. We want to be thinking about product redesign, and we want to be thinking about how we can improve our monitoring to understand the movement of plastics through the system and even when they end up in the environment. The third is recirculating. We need to be better and more effective at recycling. That means we need to understand the economics of the problem, be thinking through the right incentives, and again, looking at that accountability piece for manufacturers and producers. And the fourth part is improving. We need to be better at waste management, and we need to think about improving our recycling infrastructure. And so even though TNC is at the beginning of launching its plastics initiative, and although California is just starting to ramp up on some of these plastics efforts at a larger scale, we've seen a lot of really exciting, tangible progress over the past year since we've been engaged on this topic. And we want to highlight what some of those engagements have looked like, and also highlight a number of groups that are involved in these efforts too, and collectively pushing and advancing these policies. So we're looking at a ballot initiative, we're tracking state legislation, and we're helping increase awareness around city-level ordinances. So let's start with ballot initiatives. These really provide a powerful tool to the public to drive change. And that's because the public can come up with ideas that they propose and ultimately bring them to a vote. And so we were really excited to hear that there were leaders in the waste management and environmental space that were pushing forward this initiative that was known as the Plastic Free California Initiative. And TNC saw an opportunity to join forces and help to shape and strengthen some of this language. So I want to highlight the two components that are involved in this ballot measure. The first is that it would reduce the single-use plastics that are sold in California by 25% by 2030. What that's doing is creating a tangible source reduction target, and that is huge in and of itself. The second is that a tax would be created for each piece of single-use plastic that's being produced. And those funds would actually be used to not only drive environmental restoration, but also to make sure that we're protecting those environments that have been most impacted by plastic pollution, our streams, our beaches, and our rivers. And what's really exciting is that there's still an opportunity for those who are interested to join on to this initiative. And we'll share more about how you can get involved and how you can sign on. The second is state legislation, which provides another way to accelerate change on the plastics issue. And we really need to be looking for holistic solutions that allow us to move the needle on plastic pollution. We think there's a lot of promise in Senate Bill 54, and TNC has been among a group of like-minded NGOs that's been working to strengthen a lot of the language in this bill. There are two objectives that we want to highlight today that the bill would accomplish. The first is that it's looking to reduce waste in the state by 75%. And that can be done in one of three ways. It can be done by source reduction, it can be done by composting, and it can be done by recycling. Now we know that we can't just recycle our way out of the problem. Of all of the plastics that have ever been produced, we've only recycled about 9%. However, recycling is still a very important component in the solution set. And so when we think about for those single-use products that still will be produced, we at least want to make sure that they're compostable or that they're recyclable. And then the last is, what does it look like to drive change at the city level? And what does it mean to think about reducing waste in a meaningful way? So I know if you're like me, you probably really miss going out to your local restaurant. You probably miss going out to any restaurant. But there are a lot of really great leaders in this space who have been thinking about what it means to redesign thinking of not only dine-in, but also takeout and delivery experiences. One of the leaders in that space and on this effort has been Upstream. One of the values that TNC saw in helping to increase awareness on this is that there are three components to it. The first is that it would require restaurants to serve you on those real plates with real silverware and real cups that can be sanitized and reused again. The second is that it actually creates an incentive against generating more waste by allowing restaurants to add that 25-cent fee to those takeout cups and foodware containers. And the third is that it actually thinks about what it means to dine in and the waste that's being generated. So it allows you to just opt in. So you're like, you know what, hey, I don't need that extra silverware. I don't need that soy sauce. It's gonna go in the drawer in my kitchen anyway. People can be more conscious consumers. And so what's exciting about these kind of measures is that they allow really progressive cities and really progressive counties to lead the way in California. So this is just a flavor of some of the engagements that we've been a part of during this past year, but we're still continuing to think about what's next. One of the areas where we think TNC will be engaging next is on the issue of microfibers. So for those of you who are unfamiliar, microfibers are basically the fibers that are coming out of synthetic materials. They're less than 5 millimeters in size. And for most of you who have been in the shelter in place order, it's a lot of the clothes you're wearing now, those comfy, stretchy clothes that you kind of sit on the couch in. The thing is, when these products and fibers enter the marine ecosystem, we're still learning a lot about their impacts, but what we do know is that once they're in the marine environment, they persist, they're hard to capture, they're ingested by a number of marine organisms, and they work their way up the chain. And with global production of these synthetic fibers expected to triple by 2050, this problem, which has largely been invisible, really needs to be brought to the light. And so we need to be thinking about the right policy solutions that allow us to be more thoughtful about how do we reduce shed rates of these fibers and how can we be more effective at capturing them. So the next topic is around reducing plastic exports. It's hard to feel like you aren't doing the right thing when it comes to recycling. You've been rinsing out your orange juice containers and shampoo bottles and putting them in your blue bin. What's hard to accept is that in some instances, these products either aren't or can't be recycled here. And California has historically exported about 70% of its mixed recyclables out of the country, often to places where there's problems with waste mismanagement and where ultimately some of these products are being incinerated. So we can't keep moving this waste out of sight and out of mind. We need to be thoughtful. We need to be thinking about what policies can we do to strengthen our recycling infrastructure here. And in those moments where we are moving waste out of the country, how can we create the right environmental standards so that we're doing so thoughtfully? So what can you do? There's a number of things that we can do as individuals. We can commit to using less plastic, and we're happy to circulate resources on how you can, as individuals and as family units, commit to using less plastic and reducing your footprint. The second is you can participate in beach cleanups, and you can do these with friends and families. There's a lot of really great resources and technology apps that allow you to document and categorize the waste that you're seeing. And then the third is that you can support policies that help to reduce plastic waste. So those are the things that we highlighted earlier. They're reaching out to your representatives and letting them know what your positions are on plastic, the issues that you want them to champion. That can look like signing on to these ground up efforts like the ballot petitions. So this is really, as we see it, the determining decade for our oceans. And we see the next 10 years as critical to really moving the needle on this plastic waste issue. So we have to act now. We can work as individuals and we can work collectively, but we need to be advancing a number of these policies that will allow us to drastically reduce our plastic consumption and creation. And so as we come to a close on this talk, we've talked through a lot, but we want to leave you with some key takeaways. The first is that you can reduce your use. The plastics problem in a lot of ways like the matrix. Once you see it, you can't unsee the problem. And so you have to wake up. You have to take stock of how plastics are moving through your life. And you can start by making really small and really personal changes that allow you to make progress. And you can share your learnings with those people in your network. You have a voice, use it, speak up on this issue, make people aware of the change that you want to see on the plastics issue. And again, that can look like signing on to the Plastic Free California initiative, or that can look like letting your representatives know the changes that you'd like to see and the progress that California needs to make on plastics. And finally, it's that California can lead the way. We have to protect these amazing resources that we have right off our shore. California's positioned to lead and take bold action, and TNC is here to make sure that we continue to move forward on the plastics issue.
Thank you so much for spending time with us. We know your time is valuable. You have many choices about where you spend your time. So thank you so much. We'd love to have you here. And again, join us next week, please. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.